Hey, everybody, welcome to the Movement is Medicine podcast. This is Kevin Carr, your host, joined live and in person for the first time ever by my wonderful co-host, Brendon. Brendon, how are you today?
Cheers, Mr. Kevin.
Cheers.
We finally did it.
Live in studio.
Live in studio. What's going on?
Well, I'm just trying to soak this up because we don't know when we'll be live in studio again together, but we had to seize the moment for the holidays this week.
Probably not another year.
Yeah, probably next year we'll be back. So, no, I'm doing great. We had a good couple holiday weeks here. Christmas and New Year's, we got to spend some time together, have a nice little party. And it's been nice to be able to see you and Jenny and Rain this week. So
I know, I got to meet Kendall for the first time. The smiliest baby on record.
Yes, except for the teething moments. She's been very, very good. But
hopefully I don't have to be here for those.
Yeah. But no, it's been good. And we just got back to work here for the winter session at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning this week. It's very busy, probably as busy as I've ever seen the gym. So that's good. Comes with its own
busier
set
than
of problems.
Before COVID?
Yes. We had the best, I think, talking to Steve as they looked at the numbers to close the year, probably the best last 3 or 4 months that we've had, just because I think we've had a lot of new adult clients. We've had more athlete clients, especially at our Middleton facility. It's been very, very busy. I know actually Diane was there this morning. I talked to her today. She said it was very busy working out there today. So it's been good. And now we have all these soccer kids and hockey kids in season. So it's busy. It's good.
Awesome.
And how are things at Train Smarter and Harder?
Oh, we're still grinding out in the garage gym. We are looking at opening a space, so
that's
fingers
exciting.
Crossed that is something that happens in Q1 maybe.
Yeah,
we're working with the landlord, who's also the architect of the building, and seeing if we can build it out to our specs and what type of business we want to run there. So if not, we'll keep it in the garage and continue to work out of there and do all the other educational stuff on the side. But we do have the opportunity to maybe open a space. And I was telling you, we talked about this last week. We were talking about doing a hybrid of a training gym. So Train Smarter and Harder would be the group training and personal training, and the other part of the gym would actually be a 24-hour fitness, which I don't know anybody who has operated a 24-hour fitness facility, but the landlord likes the idea of it, and he's interested in investing. So we are pursuing that idea. So we've been actually talking to a lot of people who run these 24-hour fitness gyms. The liability is not as much as you think it would be, actually.
No one's you might not lose your house if someone gets pinned under a barbell at 2 a.m.
And you know what it is if you pick the right equipment. So actually it has a lot to do with equipment, which I didn't understand. So if you've ever been to a Planet Fitness, they only have Smith machines because the likeliness of getting hurt in a Smith machine is very, very low. They don't have any freestanding weights other than dumbbells. So I was thinking, well, we could just make a rule where you always have to lift with a crash bar. So if there's you're always lifting in a rack with crash bars, then theoretically the likeliness of being injured are very low. And because you have cameras, you have life alert lanyards, the check-in system is so elaborate and there's so much technology that the liability is actually lower than you would think it would be, which I never knew until I started. We basically hired a bunch of mentors and just looked for people around America who were running 24-hour fitness gyms that some private and some as part of the big licensing companies like an Anytime or and there's pros and cons to both. So it's very interesting.
And so you guys were thinking about opening a gym prior to COVID, right? Yeah. A standalone facility. And then luckily timing, you were able to shift and open in your own garage and you've had a successful personal training business in there. Has your vision of the business changed from what you kind of had a plan prior to COVID to what you have now? And how has that kind of affected your approach?
So the difference between, so to give everyone a little context, we were going to open a 3,000 square foot facility that looked very similar to Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. So your half of it is turf and half of it is weight room. That was pre-COVID. Luckily, we never signed a lease. And like you said, we opened it in our garage. So we basically had a mini Mike Boyle's in our garage, 300 square feet, where we only do personal training or couples or max 3 people at a time. And so this time around, we're only going to take 2,000 square feet. So we're actually going to go smaller, and then we're going to do the pods. So it'll be 4 racks with platforms on one side, and then 4 racks with platforms on the other, with 3 or 4 lanes of turf right down the middle. So essentially everybody gets their own rack. So we only run groups. So all our adult groups will be 8 people.
Yep.
So each person gets their own rack and their own dumbbell set or power blocks. They get their own Kaiser. They get their own whatever, everything. So you don't have to share. And you basically get that square or block, that 9x9 space for the entire hour, similar to kind of what Boyle's does now.
Yeah.
With a few new exceptions. And then athlete groups will do 2 people per platform.
Okay.
So we can get 16 in an athlete group, which is running adults and athletes are a little bit different. So
with the athletes, you can say, hey, you go do your cleans, you do a front plank. With the adults, they kind of like their space.
They like their space, and they need a little bit more, I don't want to say hand-holding, but more instruction, and they don't move as quick.
Yep.
But also, the athlete groups are going to be 75 minutes, the adult groups are going to be 60 minutes. So I can pack more people in with 16, and we have more time.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, there's going to be no cardio equipment, because that cardio equipment is all going to live in the 24/7 space.
Yeah.
So having access to our space also included, we're going to say it's free. Nothing is free, but you also have access to the 24/7 gym. So I can say, hey, when you're done, go ride the bike or go run on the treadmill or the elliptical or whatever we have in the 24/7 space. So they essentially there's going to be 2-door access. So you have a fob or your phone, and you bring it to the door reader.
Yeah.
It lets you in, and you can only come into our space with the 8x8s if you have an appointment with us.
Yeah.
You have a group. You're signed up for a group, and you have a membership with us. So if you don't, then you're using the 24/7 space, which will be about 3,500 square feet. So that'll actually be bigger, but I can keep a bunch of equipment in that space that everybody can use that doesn't get used that often. And then just make our space pretty much just weights, Kaisers, and speed stuff.
Yeah, because you think the biggest space sucker is typically equipment like cardio equipment, treadmills, like the amount of space all our wood waste take, our bikes take, that thing's huge. And that's something that you could say, hey, you can go on the other side and do that on your own. And then that you can get 2 for 1 out of that equipment. And you're surprised when you say 2,000 square foot. It's funny when people come to MBSC, they always say like, oh, I wish I could, get a space this big. I'm like, do you? Because you know how much it costs? You can get a lot done if you follow like that pod system, like Thrive and like what we do at MBSC, kind of the way we've always trained is the amount of work you can get done in a small amount of space if it's organized correctly. Is pretty amazing. Like I actually just looked at there's a Thrive gym going in not too far away in Concord, Mass, the Throw Club.
Yep.
And Brian Tsuyoshi, the fitness director there, Thrive guy. And they dedicated probably about that much space to Thrive. And I first saw the picture, I'm like, oh, it's kind of small. And then he sent me the pictures today, now that the equipment's in. I'm like, oh, you could run 8-person adult groups in here because it's organized well. Hey, this is where you squat. This is where you do your rows. This is where you do push-ups. And same thing, they have a health club. So then he can say, okay, now go out and you can do your conditioning.
Right.
But same thing, they're running appointment-based or group-based training through the Thrive model in that space. It's exactly kind of similar to what you described. They're not 24 hours, but you can get a lot done, and that allows you to charge a premium. It allows you to provide a premium product to the people that are going to buy it, but then provide the normal
Silver
product.
Membership.
Yeah, so whatever you want to call it.
Platinum versus silver. That's how I'm looking at it. Is you've got your platinum membership is $299 a month. You have class options at these times. Also, for example, Jenny and I travel a lot. When we're away for a week, you could theoretically go into our space and still sign in and still have access to it, even though we're not there, and go grab your program and do your workout. And because I'm going to have the cameras also set up in our space, it becomes a 24/7 space when we're away for the week.
Yeah.
So you can't say that we didn't provide you with training. We didn't provide you with the equipment. So yes, no, we are not there. And I don't know how I'll run that yet. But the idea being that like we can step away and you still have access to the gym. It's not like we're leaving you hanging high and dry.
Yeah, and it's this hybrid model that you haven't heard a lot of people talk about yet.
No.
Because it's interesting, when COVID happened, everyone thought it was going to go hybrid and online training, right? Online training and in-person training, that online training was going to eat up a lot of that. But you've kind of looked in a different direction and said, how can I provide multiple price points and options to people in a brick and mortar facility? Where you don't have to be fully dependent on one-on-one training or personalized training, but you have that option. And I think that's probably, when you look at fitness and consumers, they say it's broken down into a bunch of different groups. People who aren't interested at all, people who are indifferent. The largest group, like 63%, are what you call uninitiated believers.
Okay.
Those are people who you can convert. And then there's your diehards. So you figure like, you're not going to get the first group at all, the people who don't believe it. You cut them off the list. I think that's like around 17%.
Okay.
Then you have your indifferent people. You're probably not going to get most of them. But you have 63% of people who will probably do the 24-hour gym.
Right.
If you can convert them and say, this is a place for you where you can be comfortable, convert a certain amount of those to training. Then you have people who are diehards who will definitely do training. And that's probably equally, I think that's also around like 18%, right?
Yeah.
And so you end up giving yourself a large population of people that you could potentially work with, right?
Right.
And you have price points that can get them in the door.
Yeah.
Because they say the reason most people don't join a gym is price and time. Those are both modifiable.
Yeah.
Time becomes less a problem if they have a 24-hour option, right?
Yeah.
Because you just doubled the amount of time they probably have access to your services than if you're just doing training.
Yeah.
Price, they can have two different price points. Also, the value of what they spend. It also depends on what they believe in.
But like you said, you can make as many price points
as you want. Right.
Like I could even regulate it where it's like you can only come in twice a week with your membership.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can, the cool stuff about the way tech is now and the way the door readers integrate into the software is you can manage and make what's the word I want to use? Barriers or guardrails for any situation that you want, or any price point that you want.
Yeah, and I also say when people say price is an issue, price is dictated by what they see as value.
Right.
And so typically the consumer might look and say, this isn't worth it until they come and do it. Yeah. And then what is worth that amount of money changes to them. Like, for instance, I've seen a guy who I've been training for a long period of time. And he jumps from like startups to startups. He's a like COO. He goes to different businesses. Okay. And the one he's with now is going through a really tough time. So they actually hadn't paid him in 6 months. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. They haven't paid him in 6 months.
All right.
Probably not legal. And he's not looking for a different option. But what he said to me, he said 5 years ago, this would have been the first thing that I cut out. Because I thought of it as like a luxury. But the way that it's impacted my life and the way that it's changed my views on fitness, now it's a priority, and I cut out other things that I spend on. Now, that's not going to be everybody. I know people's financial situations are different. Training generally in a lot of people's mind is a luxury. Yeah. But I think that you provide a good enough service that some people would say that barrier, if the price is too high, comes down, especially if you have multiple options, right? Like you said. So I think you make yourself more nimble as a business when you have those different options for people to consume it.
You have more options. And it's funny too, is like we talked to many 24/7 fitness owners, and they said, yeah, everyone loves the idea of like the 24 hours and it just being an option, but most people come at the normal times. Yeah. Even though they think. Yeah, I think the big one is probably like holidays and weekends where like we're not going to be there. We're not going to be open on Sundays. We're not going to be open during the holidays. Again, we're going to be traveling for a week. I think that's where it really helps us and our facility. So I don't know how much, because I don't know anyone who's done it. I don't know how much cross transfer there's really going to be. Because like you said, like the diehards will pay for whatever for the service, but this 63%, I don't know how many of them are actually going to transfer over to the higher price point.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I don't know. I don't know anybody who does it like that, or maybe there are people who do it, but not people within our, I guess, sphere, like the functional training model, 24/7 fitness model. I've not seen that. I know there are CrossFit gyms that they have classes, and then what they do is they have open gym the rest of the day when they're not. So, for example, if you had classes between 5 and 10, you could go to the open gym model, but you wouldn't be there. You would just have them. They would just come and scan in between 10 and 3, and they could do open gym, but then the classes start again, and then you can't come to open gym. You have to join the class. So you could look at it. There's a bunch of people who do that, but I don't know anybody who has kind of broke them apart. But also have them in the same space.
So that allows you to be like, listen, if this person hasn't gone through our onboarding and isn't going to be there with a coach, I can keep them out of a potentially hazardous place and keep them in a safer place. And I think the thing, whenever people hear 24-hour gym, the first thing they go to is like, oh, someone's going to be in their bench pressing at 2:30 in the morning. But I think the 24-hour gym consumer, when they do utilize it, it's like they want to come at 5 and you don't open until 6. Or they want to work out at 8, but you close at 9. Right. And exactly, so they just want that extra hour typically, or an extra 2 hours on either end. They're not like, oh, I'm a big 3 a.m. workout guy. I like to bench at 3.
Midnight guy.
Yeah, unless they're a shift worker, which is going to be a lot of those people probably aren't going to come work out.
It's such a small percentage.
But we always think to the extreme. Right.
Yeah, we think there's going to be an entire powerlifting crew coming in at 1 a.m. Going ham on your equipment, and you're going to have to like watch your phone to make sure they're not doing anything wrong. But no, they said there's 2 people that we spoke with who own 2 24/7 fitness gyms in downtown Chicago, and they said not that many people are coming in between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. But like you said, it's usually just that extra hour, but that means I don't have to be there. But that doesn't mean like I'm not working, or like when, we're here on vacation in Boston, like, I'm going to probably have to look at my phone and say, oh, great, somebody spilled something. I'm going to have to call somebody. So like you still have headaches. It's not like it's not like Emerald's set it and forget it type thing.
No matter what business, you're going to have headaches. So
you're going to have headaches.
You have to buy into those anyways.
But so I think we're going to try it right now. At least we're looking at it. So,
and I even think of this before when we were talking about this off the air, was that when I was in Hong Kong, one of the gyms that I taught at was a 24-hour gym, and it was very training focused gym. It had turf. I mean, it looked like half of it was strength conditioning and half of it was like pretty much normal gym, but it was all open to everybody. And to get in, before they went, they had to get my face, because you went up to a face scanner, and then you went up, and because they also you had to have a COVID vaccination to go in anywhere in Hong Kong. Still, you put up your COVID. They gave you like a QR code. So you scanned your face, they approved it, and you scanned your barcode, and then the doors opened. And then they closed so like there was you're not sliding in, right? They like shut like one person at a time, and then I was like, oh wow, I mean, the technology's there now.
You can get really sophisticated. Like I looked at those, they call it a vestibule, and
nice word, good word. Drink.
I've drank the vestibule.
You're only hanging on camera.
I looked at turnstiles. I talked to everybody about what they call it tailgating. So essentially, like, I'm waiting for you to check in so I can run in behind you while the door's still open. They said it's not that big of a problem. Like, there's always going to be 10% of your people. So if you got 500 members, 50 of them are probably going to be a pain in the ass.
Like, it's the same thing with us.
It's the same thing with the
with a non-24-hour gym.
With a non-24-hour,
we have. I think about, we have 500 members. We probably have 10 that try to slide into a fourth day without signing up for a class, or they say, "Hey, I want to make up this one," even though they don't have a makeup in the bank. It's the same. So you said, like, you're just going to trade one set of problems for another. You're just going to have problems if you own a business, and so
it's going to cost you money. And
one thing I always think of is, like, whenever we're thinking about doing something, I'm like, there's going to be problems with whatever we do. There's not going to be anything we do where there's no problems. And so you have to think, like, are these problems worth it? Not like, hey, is there going to be a problem? Because there is going to be an issue, always. And so if you're like, well, I'm willing to deal with that, and that the people you've talked to, the good thing you said is you hired mentors. people who have been through it, and they can be like, listen, it's not that big of a deal. Whereas when you haven't done it, you think it's something that's like going to be terrible to deal with. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So we email people and we say, hey, we like what you're doing. I always say we'll pay you $100 an hour for your time, or we say, how much is your time, an hour of your time worth?
Yeah.
We'll pay whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just send them a Venmo after we talk for however long it takes, and then we've done that a few times now.
Yeah, so, if you're listening, one of the most valuable things you can do, I think anytime we've tried to do anything new with the gym or with the certification, it's always like, all right, who can we reach out to talk to and pay for the time? Because like you say, you pay $100, $200 for an hour or two of their time. Yeah. What you get back is typically worth way more. And so I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, and the funny part too is like a lot of people are like, I'm not going to reach out to this person, or I'm not going to add this person because they'll never get back to me or whatever. I've messaged so many people early in my career who had no idea who I was or what I did, or I just sent an email and magically they get back to me. So that's how I, for example, got Kelly Starrett to come speak at Mike Boyle's Strength and Conditioning. I always tell this story. Is I just sent him an email and I said, hey, Kelly, I see that you're doing a speaking gig in North Boston somewhere.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, would you come to the gym and just like spend an hour with us and teach us some things? And somehow he got back to me. No idea who I am. I'm 22 years old. I've been at Boyle's for 1 year. And he goes, oh, yeah, sure. I'll come by. And he came by and gave us one of the best presentations we've ever heard.
And it was more than an hour.
For 2.5 hours. Then he invited us to the seminar for free.
Yeah,
so the three of us got to go to the weekend seminar for free. And then 5 years later, I end up in California. And there's only two people I know. There's Charlie Reed, who a great trainer, good friend, ends up being the best, the
officiant,
the justice of the peace, the officiant of my wedding, right? So I only knew Charlie Reed and I only knew Kelly Starrett, and I messaged both of them. I slept in Charlie Reed's apartment floor for a week in the middle of his studio in San Francisco. And then he got me a job at a gym, and then Kelly Starrett had me over for Thanksgiving dinner, and I did a Thanksgiving dinner workout, and he gave me a year's free membership to San Francisco CrossFit.
Yeah.
Only two people I knew, and I just sent Charlie a text, and I sent Kelly an email, and it can be as simple as that. Like, it doesn't have to be you just go in with grace and say, hey, I value your time. I will pay for your time, and pretty amazing things happen.
The power of reaching out.
It's
pretty amazing. You'd be surprised. Most people are pretty nice.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
I'm glad we got that update. That was good. We're on the same pace right now.
Well, it's funny. I thought I had nothing to share or talk about, but
I knew if we pulled the cord, you'd get going. So, we got plenty we can talk about. I know one thing we were chatting about before this, and it's been a hot topic, both in NBSC, but pretty much the darling of the internet as of right now is like Zone 2. Are you watching how nicely I'm pouring this beer?
It's a pretty pour.
Yeah. Has been Zone 2 training. So for those of you who might not be familiar with terminology, as it can be confusing, Zone 2 essentially being the idea of low intensity aerobic work or cardiac output based work. So work that's done underneath a 75% heart rate, max 75% of your max heart rate, done for an extended period of time. So like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, with the idea of improving cardiac output. So your ability, the amount of blood you can deliver with each pump, the amount of your overall aerobic capacity, so how long you can work for. So intensity is not the priority, but duration and continuity of your effort over a long period of time is the idea. And
so it's building a bigger gas tank.
Yes, building a bigger gas tank. And, what you often hear people say, the very physiological focused coaches and practitioners will say, like, it improves your ability to deliver blood with each pump. You get more oxygen and more blood delivery. It improves your mitochondria. And so a bunch of benefits for performance and mainly for health and longevity. When you're talking about things like cardiovascular health, diabetes, management of blood sugar, all of these things, lots of benefit there. And so there's been a lot of discussion, the pendulum, as it always swings in fitness back and forth from, hey, back in the 70s was the aerobic boom. They didn't call it cardiac output then. They just called it jogging. And everybody did it.
So jogging. Yeah.
Everybody.
Jogging zone 2.
Well, it just goes,
Right.
jogging for a long period of time is zone 2. Riding the Airdyne for a long period of time is zone 2.
Hiking at a steep incline.
Yeah,
zone
as
2.
long as you're not can you have a conversation generally for a long period of time while you do that, right? If you're breathless and your heart's up in your throat, you're probably going too hard, right? The biggest challenge most people have when they're doing this is that their intensity gets too high, right? The issue is never that they're not working, that they're working too slow.
They're working too slow.
And so the pendulum, it's just the same thing renamed, right?
Yeah.
And then for a while, it was only intervals, only Tabatas, right? And now I think we're coming back. Maybe we're getting a little swing back to the other side, and maybe we're going to come back to the center where we say, hey, both of these things are good.
Yeah.
And can see where this conversation is probably going to go in their own context.
Yeah.
Because you hear a lot of sports-focused people, sports performance coaches saying, hey, you need the bigger gas tank.
Bigger gas tank, yeah.
So you can recover in between bouts of high-intensity work, right? So if I'm a hockey player and I skate a shift for 45 seconds really, really hard, that zone 2 is going to help me while I'm sitting on the bench to recover, deliver all the blood and oxygen, help me recover between those high-intensity bouts before I go back out and work again and maintain that effort over the length of a game, right? All 3 periods of a hockey game. Where you hear the health and longevity people say, hey, it's really going to help you manage your blood sugar. It's going to help reduce your cardiovascular risk. And so I think there can be some sort of back and forth is there as much value, do you think, in sports performance for zone 2 work as there is in longevity and health? Is it the same? Is it just as valuable in both contexts? Or should we think about the individual sport and the individual, general population client and what do they need?
So when everything I've heard about it, I've thought about this a bunch now over the last, it's been a hot topic the last month.
Yeah.
So for the athlete specifically, if we're talking about an athlete or a sport that involves speed, you don't even get on the ice or on the field unless you have horsepower and you have speed. So this is where, for me, strength and power have to come first, because if you're not fast enough to play said position, you sit on the bench. What?
I'm raising my hand. For those who can't see, that's me.
I didn't know if you were giving me a high five or if you were saying that's you.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's always I think it was Dan John quoting Brett Jones, but strength is the glass and everything else goes in the glass.
Yeah.
So strength and power for me have to be the most important when it comes to sports performance.
Yeah.
If you want to be on the field and not on the bench, you got to be fast, and you also got to know how to play the game and all that and be technical. But from a strength and conditioning standpoint, you have to have strength and power. Now, I find it very rare that the size of somebody's gas tank or their aerobic capacity is what's keeping them from being on the field.
Yeah.
I find it a problem keeping you on the field for all 4 quarters or all 2 halves, right?
Yeah.
So LeBron James can jump 44 inches at the beginning of the game, but by the end of the game, he can only jump 20 because he's so tired. Well, he's pretty useless the second half of the game.
Yeah. But
the first half of the game, so you got to be able, I would rather him jump 40 inches the whole game.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be but if he can only jump 20 inches.
He's not LeBron James.
He's not LeBron James, and he's not playing professional basketball.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, this is where, I would rather spend most of my time, and if I'm thinking of a long-term athletic development model, with a younger athlete, the hardest thing to do is to build and maintain type 2 muscle fibers.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You probably know the research better than you definitely know the research better than I do. But you can change different fibers to be more type 2 specifically at a younger age. This is why you see kids who do gymnastics have a very springy step even as they age, which kids who didn't have gymnastics might not have. Right? Because they know how to draw power, and a lot of those fibers at a very young age switched to type 2 as opposed to staying, is it type 2A? Or going to type 1, which are going to be more of your zone 2 type muscle fibers.
Yeah, the long-term athletic development people say it's really important to prioritize speed and power during that peak height velocity. That time when you see these kids growing, changing their height as fast as possible. So for girls, it's probably a little earlier, right? They tend to mature
13,
more physically.
14,
Boys, it's probably more 13 to 17, 16, right? And obviously there's a big genetic component, right? But
we're always fighting genetics.
Yes.
And you want to get as much as you can out of what you have.
Yeah. And real simple, like there's a lot of couch to 5K programs. There's no couch to NBA programs. like you can train aerobic capacity to the point where you can go run a race, right? Like if you and I wanted to go run the marathon, we could have trained all winter and we could go run the marathon. If you and I trained all winter to try to go, run in a 110-meter sprint
against
event.
Usain Bolt.
Let's not even go that far. Like against they have these open meets. Like athletes. Steve Bigelow runs in the Valentine's Day meet every year at BU. He doesn't train all year. I mean, he just lifts weights like maybe 2 days a week, and that's probably being nice to Steve at the gym. But like come January, he'll start doing some flying sprints. He'll start lifting, but Steve was a collegiate sprinter. He's still the 110-meter record holder at UMass Amherst, and he is a genetically gifted individual. He has that, right? So he can go train for a couple months, and he'll get to the finals every year. The BU Valentine's Day meet. You and I couldn't do that, right?
I could.
He already has that, and
even if I trained all year long.
And so when you talk about the idea of like fatiguing over the course of a game, right? When you tend to see these guys who hey, they're not in game shape, is what they say. When does that happen? After an injury, right? Especially hey, you're not in basketball shape yet. You know how they get in basketball shape?
Play basketball.
Yeah, I have a kid who I just rehabbed his ankle. He broke his ankle last year. We trained a lot in the off season, a lot of power, a lot of rehab for his ankle. We did modest conditioning as he was able to start running again. It was pretty conservative with the doctor and PT about returning to impact. And then I said, he's like, am I going to be in shape? I said, well, now you can go to basketball practice. And we're still going to run tempos. We ran some shuttles. But my answer to him wasn't like, hey, you're going to ride a 45-minute bike ride or you're going to go out for a 5-mile run. That wasn't going to get him ready for basketball because the nature of the sport is sprint really hard, up and down, jump, stand around for a second, sprint really hard, up and down, jump, run for a second. Same thing with hockey is we have all these guys who train with us all summer. They get off the ice. If they had a great year, they get off in June, right? Some of these guys are done earlier than that, right? So they lift. They take a couple months off the ice. As August gets close, they start to, in between their 4 days with us, they start to go up and do power skating. They start to do skating work with a skating coach to get ready for preseason. Then they have preseason, and they said even the skating work they do with their coach 4 days a week doesn't get them ready for preseason, but then preseason starts to get them ready. And then even with the NHL, what do they say when you get to the playoffs? It's a whole different game. The level of speed goes up. So I still think a lot of times for sports performance, for the majority, let's say we're going to take the bell curve, 80% of people, replicating the demands of the game are going to get most of these athletes there.
For conditioning.
For conditioning standpoint. There's going to be the rare exception of someone who maybe had an injury, who had a lot of downtime where, hey, maybe it would be beneficial that gap of getting in game shape might be shrunken down. If you do a little bit of low intensity stuff, because what they lose when they're deactivated, they're not doing anything, is the mitochondria, right? The thing that changes. What's really interesting about losses in strength and power versus losses in aerobic capacity is you lose your aerobic capacity much quicker. Mitochondria have a short life, meaning you can gain them quick and you can lose them quick, right? Strength and power, you can maintain strength and power by training a couple days a week,
Right.
right, and hitting the right intensity.
Right.
And so what I tell people is like, listen, if we just get a little jump start, maybe we can do a little bit, but then once you start playing, you'll get it back.
Yeah.
But strength and power will take a little while to gain. You can't, you don't get strong and powerful overnight.
It's much harder to make somebody strong and powerful than it is to get them in shape.
Yes. Yeah.
For whatever it is they need to be in shape for. So really, I only see Zone 2 being beneficial for sports performance, like you said, in the rehab type, or like post game, like whatever, flush, or like you just need to get moving.
Yeah.
Other than that, again, it becomes time dependent too. Like
that's the biggest.
If I have 10 hours a week with you, and that's all we have, is we have 10 hours a week to train, because the other 10 hours or 15 hours you play your sport, I'm going to spend it making you move well and getting you stronger and faster.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have you get on the bike for 5 hours out of the 10 and only have 5 hours of strength training.
And 10 hours is pretty generous.
10 hours is generous. I know. I want to use round numbers.
The reality of like most team sports is you have 3 hours a week.
In reality.
Right? Like if you think
I'm thinking off season.
If we were an NHL hockey team, in reality they probably get 2 or 3 lifts a week. That like might not even be an hour.
And they're 45 minutes.
Right? So when you do your zone 2, right?
On the ice.
Because a lot of the numbers you hear, if you read like a lot of textbooks or you hear people talk about, they're like, 175 minutes a week would be the minimum. Maybe 300 minutes a week would be better. And I'm like, that doesn't work for a team sport athlete. Also, when you hear us talk about athletes, we're talking about mixed modal, variable sports, field sports, basketball, baseball, football, soccer, things where they're going to sprint, they're going to be down. They're going to jog, they're going to sprint, they're going to change directions.
Right.
We're not talking about endurance sports. Obviously, endurance sports in and of themselves are zone 2, zone 3 dependent.
They're zone 2 sports.
Right? And where they're going to be living in cardiovascular work. So if you're cycling, that's different. If you're running, that's different. But the majority of people training athletes are training the big five, like the big sports, right?
Yeah.
And so your time to dedicate those things, because they're getting a lot of cardiovascular work just in practice. They're getting those 175 minutes a week are coming with their coach who's doing no strength and power, and in all likelihood they don't actually value the strength and power like we do, right? The traditional coach is like, go run 5 miles and then come back. And for instance, I have a kid who's a college pitcher, and like the coach's idea of strength conditioning is like, go run 5 miles every day after practice. Not sure that makes him a better pitcher, right? In a position in a sport where you're explosive and then rest for a minute and then go again.
You've built a bigger gas tank, but you've done it at the expense of horsepower.
Yeah.
And in baseball, in a lot of these sports, right? Like horsepower and velocity wins. Like, do you want a guy who throws 89 or you want a guy who throws 101? Right? Like, so I'm going to take 101 all day.
You can throw 89 for 9 innings. But you're going to get shelled.
You're going to get shelled.
Yeah.
Unless you're Greg Maddux. He's an anomaly.
The exception,
it's just the dedication that it takes to do it. And when you rob Peter to pay Paul, like somebody loses. And I don't want to lose when it comes to athletics. I don't want to lose strength and power in order to try to build a bigger gas tank. I would much rather build a bigger gas tank later, or like the gas tank only has to be so big, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're playing 3 periods and it's 60 minutes long, like your gas tank only has to be big enough.
Yeah.
Having it be bigger is not better. Now, when we switch this conversation over to longevity and the average person or general population, maybe it's different.
Yeah.
Right. A bigger gas tank means more years in your life or more heartbeats that you get. So I don't know. Do we want to switch, or do you have anything else to say about?
Yeah, no, the gas tank idea is like, think about like racing in cars. Like theoretically they could put bigger gas tanks in, but the cars would be slower because the weight of the gas.
Yeah.
Right. Are you willing to take that pit stop? Right, that rest period, that shift change, so that person can go back out there on the ice, right? Like no one watches Sports Center for the guy with the best endurance in a hockey game or the best endurance in an NBA game. You watch because you want to see top 5. You want to see people get dunked on, right?
Yeah,
that's what people tune in sports for. So from a sports performance standpoint, I think, like you said, strength and power has to be the priority.
And then even interval, we didn't talk much about it, but even interval training. I'm gonna do interval training because it's more like the sport.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to spend. I got 10 minutes for conditioning. We're doing intervals. We're not doing a slow ride unless we said you're coming back from injury or you're beat to shit from playing 10 games and you just need to flush it out.
Yeah.
For the most part, if we're talking off season, we're going intervals.
Yeah, and what's interesting
if I got 10 minutes
is when you talk about aerobic capacity, there's a ton of research. Like Dan Baker, his group has done a ton of research on the impact of, they did all Tabata style intervals, right? And so when people say Tabatas, and they weren't even true Tabatas, like the actual Tabata research was done about 170%.
For 20 seconds on 10 seconds left, not 20 seconds
170% of VO2 max. So most people, no one listening to this, unless you are like a competitive cyclist, will ever sprint at that intensity. But what they were doing, he did at 110% or 120%, based on whether it was 10 on, 20 off, was done at 120%. 20 on, 10 off was done at 110%, right? And what they found is they were able to maximize VO2 max and aerobic capacity while still doing Tabata-based work. Okay. And so if you do 8, as they did in the research, 8 rounds of 20 on, 10 off, that's 4 minutes of work. And they're able to maximize aerobic capacity. When you say is enough, that's probably enough for the sport.
Yeah.
Without dedicating a lot of time. We do 2 rounds of that, so you end up doing 16 sprints. It takes 8 minutes.
Right.
Right.
As opposed to, hey, get on this bike for 45 minutes and ride.
Yeah. And so for the athletes, that's probably enough, right?
Right.
Then when we switch the conversation to general population, that's when the priorities change. And it becomes a good example of like what's good for an athlete not necessarily is what's good for an adult client who's just trying to be healthier, trying to reduce their cardiovascular risk, trying to lose some weight. Their priorities are going to be different.
When you get competitive, when you put a competition in between things, you're willing to give up certain things in your life or certain capacities or certain health.
Yeah. Sports aren't healthy.
No, they're not. So I'm willing to give up some of my health in order to win the gold, I'm willing to give up some of my social life in order to do XYZ, to win this medal, to win this game, I played football my whole life. You played football your whole life. Like you are at risk of a brain injury in order to compete in this game. Like nothing about getting hit in the head by a helmet is healthy.
Yes.
Like at all.
Yeah.
There's zero health at all in that sport. But you're willing to do it. You're willing to sacrifice that. Now, when we're technically both general population clients.
I'm a general population client.
I am a general population client. When I'm looking at my longevity and I'm no longer competing in anything other than can I live healthy for as many years as possible?
Yeah.
I'm not willing to give up my health to do stupid shit like run into other people with a helmet anymore and give myself a concussion. Right?
Yeah.
So that's where I might now be willing to get on a bike for 45 minutes. Or I like to think that when we walk the dog, I do the ruck thing. We got a 25-pound bag and a 45-pound bag. When I wear the 45-pound bag, I'm in zone 2.
Oh, yeah.
When I wear the 25-pound bag, I don't really reach zone 2, but I just bring the dog for the walk.
Yeah, I put a weight vest on with the dog.
Right.
And so what is good training with sports is measured in sporting outcomes, how the athlete feels, how the athlete performs. What is good training with the general population outcome is whether it's body comp, whether it's blood lipid numbers, whether it's cardiovascular measurements.
Or disability
years. That's good training. And so zone 2 work in those contexts can provide really good outcomes. We know we can significantly change their blood pressure. We can change their resting blood glucose. We can change their cardiovascular risk by adding those things in. And these people likely aren't doing anything outside.
They don't have practice.
They don't have practice.
They don't have 3 hours of practice. They don't have...
the amount of people who come to us and the only exercise they do is the 2 or 3 days a week. So if you can be like, hey, if you can go for a walk, or if I can add in, like one thing we've been doing one day a week
Mm-hmm.
is being like, the conditioning at the end today is 20 minutes steady state. A lot of people wouldn't even consider that zone 2. Though. You got to do 45 minutes.
Right.
Well, they're not going to do 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So when I said 20 minutes, they're like, oh, shit. And we even carved out like 10 minutes at the end of the workout, so it really only cost like a bonus of 10 to them. And I know a lot of people ain't running out to work when they leave here. I know the type of life they live.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, 20 minutes. I'm like, put on a podcast. I don't care. Put on Netflix on your phone.
Yeah. Oh,
But if you have a heart rate monitor on, I say just keep it like 65%
yeah.
and do that. I don't even care if it's that when they start, just do it for
Just
20
do
minutes.
it.
I don't care if it's 50%.
Right.
Just the battle with a lot of these is you have a lot of these practitioners talking about it on the internet who don't actually coach people. I'm like, you're going to go tell, the 65-year-old guy in my adult group in the morning who is hungover half the time he comes in that he has to do 300 minutes a week of zone 2.
Zone 2.
You know what he's going to tell you? Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to. I'm taking my services elsewhere.
Yeah, so I'm like, hey, what you have to work with that person and say, why don't you give me 20 minutes today at whatever pace you can manage, and then we're going to work from there. And then maybe he'll get to 20 minutes at the percentage you want, and then maybe he'll start to adopt something outside of there.
Right.
And that's when you can start to get a lot of benefits. And I actually have a really good – I was going to post this today. I'll post it tomorrow. I have a guy I've been working with for a long time, right? And he's single. He's 60 years old. He divorced, lives by himself, workaholic, works all the time. Okay. And he was only coming to me one day a week. And when he first started to come to see me, he was doing nothing at all, seeing me one day a week. Every time he'd come in, he'd kind of moan and groan. He'd want to end the session early. I knew he didn't necessarily enjoy it, but he was doing it because he knew he needed to do it. Really out of shape.
Okay.
I started talking about step counts early on, was not interested, didn't care, didn't want to talk about it. I said, okay, let's just focus on getting you to come 1 hour a week. That's it. Pretty low bar. Most people are like, 1 hour a week doesn't do anything. It does a little bit.
It does a little bit.
What it really
do
does
much, but it does
is
a little
build a habit.
That's right.
So we got, for about 2.5 years, we got consistent one day a week to the point where he went from like not really wanting to be there to enjoying it.
Okay.
Part of it was our relationship kept getting better, but he started to see the value. His body changed. He felt better. Then he goes, I think I'll start doing some walking. Okay. And initially he had a dog. Dog has since passed, rest in peace. But then he started to walk, and he started to track on his phone. You know how many steps he did the first year? On average, we looked at his 1 year average.
1 year. Hold on, let me guess. This is before the dog.
This is initially with the dog.
Okay. And then he started walking.
He started walking then. And
so 6,000 steps.
3,300 steps he averaged a day.
3,300?
Work from home. So there's a lot of people now. Listen, a lot of people work from home. So the walking for that person, if they're a single individual in their 60s, they probably don't have a big social life. They're not going out. They're not going to do a lot of things, right? 3,300 a day. And most people would be like, that's so – it's not great by the statistics, but I don't know what he was doing before he was tracking. Probably less.
True, probably less before.
Right? I didn't live in a big house.
Yeah.
Okay. Next year, you know what he did?
9,000.
No.
What?
4,500.
Oh, okay.
But that's a year. That's a year's worth of data.
Yeah.
3,500, 4,500. So he got better.
Yeah.
Because we kept talking about it. You know what I did last year?
Now 9,000?
6,700.
Okay.
But guess what? We're trending the right way.
Well, that's double from 2 years ago.
What if I told him do 10,000 steps a day?
Oh, God. Yeah,
he wouldn't do it.
And
so the problem is like you have these fitness people who have these numbers in their head where they're like, you have to do this.
Right.
And I said, if I told him that, I would have lost him. He probably wouldn't train at all. Mm-hmm. So my question is, do you actually want to help people? Because we had a conversation, meet people where they're at. We did a whole episode on
that. Whole episode.
And so I said, what are you willing to do? Yeah. And you have to figure out what is that person willing to do and think of it as a long-term project. Now he's been with me for a long period of time, and he goes, I'm going to beat this number next year. He said to me, he would have never said that shit to me like 5 years ago. He would have been like, I don't give a shit about my steps.
Yeah.
And he really prioritizes coming in every week. And sometimes he adds an extra day and he does stuff at home. Now, when he doesn't see me, I say, I want you in between your work, get up, do 10 squats, 10 push-ups. And he's like, today I did 15 squats, 15 push-ups. And so you have to think about these things as like long-term changes, no matter how old the person is, where they are on the spectrum.
When he walks, do you even think he's in zone 2?
Sometimes. He says he has some trails near his house. So sometimes I try to speed up, but I'm like, I bet
you, though, for the most part, he's not in zone 2. But like you said, just do it.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit what zone you're in?
Because even
Yeah.
aside from the zone 2, the biggest thing, when they have all the step count data, the 10,000 steps a day was off this Japanese study. Really, the optimal is probably around 8,500 steps a day based on the numbers. They didn't track heart rate at all. They said the biggest impact on health and longevity when they looked at those people wasn't their voluntary physical activity, so going to the gym. It was just their step count.
Okay.
So the biggest thing that people can do, they looked at people who were going to the gym multiple times a week but weren't getting those steps.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at people who were getting those steps, but it didn't matter what they did. And those people, on average, had less all-cause mortality than people who went to the gym voluntarily and didn't move the rest of the time. So I said to him, like, if your ultimate goal is to die later than what you might already be dying at, I guess if they're going to be very honest, then you just got to get steps in throughout the day. So break up your day and go for a walk. Right? And so now he goes for the walk. He doesn't have a dog anymore. He's like, I just know, hey, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go walk.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go back to work. And I'm going to go walk after work. And now for him, it's a habit. But you have to get them to just start to do something. So going back to the zone 2, hey, just see if they'll ride 10 minutes steady state for a while.
Right.
And then maybe they build a habit where they're like, oh, I'm going to go walk with a backpack on. That's a pretty rare behavior. Like I have one guy who's a huge diehard. He's a big, one of my clients is a big Peter Attia guy. It's actually, it's his doctor. It's his personal physician.
Okay.
When he gets done training with me, he lives in the city, lives in downtown Boston. He gets done training with me. He's like, I'm going to go walk the dogs. He puts on a 50-pound ruck with 2 dogs and walks down friggin' Boylston Street and like does laps for like 45 minutes. No one is going to do this. This guy is a diehard.
So this goes back to what I brought up originally, like when you talked about diehards, right? Diehards are a small percentage. You're trying to help the 63%.
Yeah.
So like the diehards are going to do the zone 2.
He knew about Peter Attia before me.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing is like zone 2 training is probably like a phase 3 type individual. Like you're not doing it with anybody who only comes in twice a week.
Yeah.
You're not doing it with anybody who's not interested.
Yeah.
Like you have to be very, very serious about fitness to even try zone 2 training because it is so boring.
Yeah.
So, but again, like that's where we're talking about this, like this pendulum swinging, right? Like the diehard interval people and the diehard zone 2 people, like the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. You should probably do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But it's all context dependent because like if you don't have enough time to train, that's going to dictate which version we do or what type of conditioning we do. If you don't want to do it, then I'm not going to force you to do it or make you sit on the bike for 45 minutes. So we're going to just do 4 minutes of interval training because that's what you'll actually do.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to, or maybe you will go for a walk, but you're not going to ride the bike for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So this is, again, like it's so context dependent. The answer is probably do a little bit of both. I think, again, we talked about athletes. The answer is probably do more interval stuff, and they'll get a lot of the zone 2 during practice, like drills. And like when you everybody's practiced before. When you practice for 2.5 hours, you're not going all out for the whole 2.5 hours. Like you do that at the game, but during practice, I would guess most of it lives between zone 1 and 3.
Yeah.
And you're only doing the high level interval stuff when you're going all out in a drill. Yeah. But I mean, you do 2 or 3 drills of practice, so maybe 20 minutes.
A lot of
standing
around.
There's a lot of standing around.
Yeah. Well, it's like when they look at the soccer data, they're like, you know who spends the most time standing or walking in all of the World Cup?
Messi.
Yeah. He spends the most time just standing still or walking of any player.
But he can get to the ball before anybody else and then beat you with the ball at his feet. That's why he's the best in the world.
Exactly.
Not because he has the biggest gas tank. It's because he's got the most horsepower and he has just a big enough gas tank to make the whole game and keep his horsepower high.
Look at that. That's a good way to end that.
That's a great way.
And this segues into, I want to talk about something we're doing at the gym that kind of actually comes off of that.
Yeah, the MyZone,
Yeah, so we're doing a MyZone challenge. We've had MyZone since probably 2017 at the gym, maybe longer than that.
I think longer.
Yeah, actually longer than that. And we have a lot of members who have signed up. I talked to them and say we have over 400 people who've gotten a MyZone through us. We've never done a challenge, ever. And she was actually amazed.
Five, 6 years.
She said, how have you never done a challenge? You have this many people. But we just try to always say, hey, this is a really good way to look at your heart rate. And even still, a lot of our clients in this time, like even the ones that have it, don't really like, they're like, oh yeah, it's like, that's my heart rate on the screen. They don't even know that there's an app.
Yeah, that's fine. Cool.
We were educating them this week. A lot of them don't even know that there's an app on the phone that they can look at it when they're not at the gym. They're like, oh, I just thought it worked here on the screen. And they don't even know what the other two numbers mean, the percentage or the MEPs or whatever.
Yeah.
But our big thing is, if you're going to get people to do zone 2, they need to even know what the zone is. They don't know what that means.
What's zone?
And if I say, okay, if they don't have a heart rate monitor, and I say 60 to 75% of your max, they're like, well, how do I know that? And I say, well, can you have a conversation? So one we said is like, well, let's try to prioritize people just understanding their heart. Should be something they should know. So we figured a 6-week challenge where we just say, hey, we're going to give prizes to the top 3 people who have the most MEPs, which are this is just a number that they have. My zone exercise points, when you're in these different percentage zones, like 60 to 70%, 70 to 80, 80 to 90, you accumulate more points for the time you're in the zone. Whatever. It's a made-up metric, but it works. It's a metric. And so it motivates them to do things on their own and to work when they're come to the gym and come to more classes, right? Yeah. And it's been great because just in the last 2 days of doing it, we've had a bunch of people coming to be like, oh, I want to buy one. And we've had people who already have them become educated on, oh my God, I can do it on my phone. It means I can wear this when I play tennis. I can go for walks and things like that. So it gets them to think. But the first part is getting them to educate because they have no idea what any of this means. I think, again, a lot of these people, we hear people talk on podcasts and blogs and seminars, and you realize it's so far removed from what the average person you work with knows or understands.
Right.
That I'm like, this is a heart rate monitor that you put on your chest. And then those are the amount of beats per minute. Like, well, what's a good amount of beats per minute? I'm like, well, it's not what's good. It's like, this is normal. This is what's a good resting heart rate. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Where should I be working when I'm here? Let's go over that. What is the percentage? What is that based off? Hey, this is probably what your max might be estimated. And just getting them to figure out those things makes them, one, feel like, wow, these people really care about me, so they like the gym more. That's a big positive, obviously. But it also makes them a little bit more tuned into their health to a point where maybe they take an extra walk a few times a week, or they say, hey, I'm going to hop on the Airdyne bike when I'm done and ride for 20 minutes because this seems to be important. Just those little steps, I think, makes a big difference.
Right. I mean, if we wanted our clients to listen to this podcast, we wouldn't call it Zone 2 cardio. We'd call it learn about your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, I want to know about that.
Yeah.
But the second I say, let's talk about Zone 2 training, they're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
When I say, let's talk about your heart, oh, man, they're all in.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your heart. No, that's awesome. I am surprised it took you that long to do a challenge, but just like anything else, not that it got pushed to the side. It was the right idea. It's just there's so many other things fighting for everybody's time, but it is the right time to go with a challenge. And it'll be very interesting to see, like you said, it's not even about who wins the MEP challenge. It's just, can you educate people more?
And what you learn is that they don't care about the prizes at all.
No.
People are just competitive. It's like with my zone, for me, I'm just like, I need to get my MEPs every month or I'm going to lose my silly status. Like I'm at gold. I'm at gold status. I'm trying to get to platinum. I got to do 2 more months with 1,300 MEPs. And I'm like, oh, shit, I got to make sure I get. So to me, really, when I travel, I'm like, I got to bring my zone. Because if I'm gone for 10 days, like I was a couple weeks ago, I'm like, that's 10 days I'm behind. Right. And so everybody naturally has a little bit of that in them, some more than others.
Yeah.
And so the clients are already talking like, oh, I got to get my MEPs in to see. Even just, they don't care about winning. They just want to beat the friend.
Right.
So,
but they didn't even know what they were a few weeks ago. So the fact you even got them talking about it is huge.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming down to book recommendation time, Brendon.
Yeah, 58 minutes. We're right on time here.
So,
what do we got?
Let's see. It's the first time I've had to go to my phone. Usually I pull one out from behind me, but I've been listening to this on audio. So, I'll bring up my Audible so I have the author's name correct here.
Well, I got mine. So mine is The Book of Joe by Joe Madden.
Okay.
He was the manager for the Cubs.
And always wore the glasses.
The Tampa Bay Devil Rays. He went to the World Series with them, but lost.
Yep.
And then won with the Cubs.
Yep.
He was with someone in between there or before. I can't remember. But he was a manager in the big leagues for like 21 years, I think, and for the minor leagues for 10 years before
Yeah.
that. And it just goes through his whole process, his philosophy, and they call him a player.
I was going to say, he's a big players coach.
He's a
guy,
big
right?
players coach, and getting to know your players first before you ever coach them.
Yeah.
And then he just goes through his biggest mistakes, things that he did wrong as a minor league manager, as a big league manager, and how he learned from them. It's just a really good story about coaching, but also about relationships. So the Book of Joe by Joe Madden was one of my favorite coaching reads last year.
Nice. I'll add it to the list.
Add it to the list.
Does he read it himself?
That's a good question. I believe he reads the intro in the first chapter,
Yes.
and then not after that.
Okay. So I've been reading How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes. As you know, we have a 6-month-old daughter.
And I have an 8-year-old.
Yeah, so that is a priority of ours here at the Carr House. And this is by Melinda Wenner Moyer. And it's, so there you go.
I just want to see the cover so that I know what to get.
I'll send you. I actually have the hard copy up there too.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Because I've been reading and then listening a little bit. When I'm home, I'll read a little bit. Then in the car, I just flip it on. And so it's really good because I always said, to people who've been asking about it, if you change the name to How to Manage Employees Who Aren't Assholes or How to Not Manage Like an Asshole.
Or how to not manage.
Because a lot of it is your behavior, obviously.
Right.
It's very, very good. And it takes kind of that in between. I think a lot of people talk about modern parenting, kids can't do anything wrong, which I think there's a lot of people do that wrong. Everything is let's handle these kids with gloves. And they take that approach along with also explaining consequences and reality. Because I think some people are no, you're just a hard parent. Well, that's kind of also doesn't work.
You drive them away.
Yeah, or you raise people who are assholes.
Right. Or that.
Yeah, and so I think it does a good job of explaining what the science says. And then in a real practical sense, this woman talking about raising her own kids, listen, that doesn't mean I'm always a good parent, right? And that's the real conversation that she gives an example of her own situation or her friends or family situation about raising kids. And then how you have to realize that a 7-year-old kid doesn't have a frontal lobe. So they're going to act out. And so you have to be able to say I understand that might make you feel that way, but this is the reality of this situation, how to have a conversation. But you could have a client or you could have an employee who acts out.
Their frontal lobe shuts down.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't fully developed in the first place. Okay? And you have to have a conversation with them and say, hey, I understand you're upset about this, but this is how we're going to manage the situation. This is how I'm going to manage the situation, and how to have a conversation. And it has it's very well organized and very honest in how they put it together. So, like I said, I've been reading the hard copy, and then I'll also listen in the car because it's one that I can just kind of listen to easily. So I'll essentially probably get through it twice, I think, in the process. Which is good because I'll.
So Kendall be 1.
Yeah, Kendall be 2 or 3 by the time I finish. So maybe I'll figure it out. And I'll probably have to reread it. And you're going to still make mistakes. That's another thing. You'll still make mistakes, but there's things to think about. And so it's been really enjoyable because some parenting books I think can be really dry and boring and also kind of preachy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel that way when I listen to this. I don't feel like she's lecturing me or preaching to me about how to be a parent. She's just talking about honest.
It's the how to be a perfect parent.
That doesn't exist.
No, that gets old.
So it's been very good. Ariel and I have really enjoyed it. When we're in the car together, we're let's put it on and listen to this chapter, right? So that way we can go through the audio together and kind of do it. So I would recommend those. We'll put them in the show notes. Again, if you guys have any questions, Brendon and I will do another podcast. I'm going to record one with Pat Van Galen this week. I will let you know on the time. We're still waiting on a time for this weekend.
Okay.
So we can get her, and she's going to be our winter seminar speaker, one of the many. So for those who are listening, our MBSC, I should have said winter seminar. It's the spring seminar.
Spring.
MBSC spring seminar is April 1st and 2nd. We departed from our normal winter seminar we normally do in January, February for a couple reasons. Primarily scheduling. It was difficult with all of us to get a schedule right, conflicts with other seminars. Also, weather has been a problem for the last 3 years. We've had a blizzard the day before, 3 years in a row, and people can't get there. It's a pain in the ass. So I said, just hopefully April 1st and 2nd won't be bad. It is April Fool's Day.
I bet you there's a blizzard.
Yeah, probably.
In April.
But our guest speakers are Jordan Sayat. Many people know Sayat Fitness. Also a Boston guy originally, so good to bring him home.
She's still Gary Vee's trainer?
Yes, and social media extraordinaire, online training extraordinaire, really nice guy. He's going to be one of our guest speakers. Pat Van Galen, who, if you're familiar with MBSC, she's been a guest speaker for us a bunch. Brilliant, really, really knowledgeable about the training for longevity in aging and overall health. She's a ball of freaking energy. She's a great example of her work because she acts like she's like in her 20s. I'm not going to guess her age, but she acts like she's in her 20s. And then Scott Livingston. So Scott Livingston was an NHL strength coach for a long time. He's worked in professional hockey for a long time. He's a fellow Canadian, Montrealer, like my wife. He actually lives in Mount Tremblant now, trains a bunch of professional athletes, speaks all over the world. He has an unbelievable podcast.
Does he?
Leave Your Mark. He does. He's one of the best interviewers.
All right.
I've already asked good questions. Very thoughtful guy. I've had a few beers with him. Great guy to have a conversation with. He's going to be one of our guest speakers as well, along with, obviously, we have to have Mike at the Mike Boyle Conditioning Seminar. Myself, Vinny Toludo, Dan McGinley, and Eric Daddario.
Eric. Eric.
Yeah, and so Eric, for those of you who don't know Eric Daddario, he's been a strength conditioning coach at MBSC for a while now. I don't know how many years, but it's a long time.
Since I left,
yes.
So probably 6 or
7 years. And he is he also does a lot of speaking around mental health. He's had some personal experiences of people in his family suffering from things like addiction and mental health issues, and he travels all around the United States speaking at high schools and universities. He goes to a lot of Division I colleges and speaks to teams. Coaches bring him in, talking about communication with your athletes, communications with your teammates and your family, and how to get over obstacles. We know, like, people go through things in silence all the time, and how to have conversations and how to be an advocate for yourself or advocate for people around you. So he's going to talk about relating to your athletes and becoming like a resource for them. And he's an electric speaker, a lot of energy. So he'll be really...
Him and Pat should have a battle.
Yeah.
An energy battle.
Yeah, so he'll be really, really good. So
hopefully you don't go back to back.
Yeah, no, I spaced them out. I mean, the roof will come off. And so that'll be April 1st and 2nd, Saturday, Sunday. It's available in person. You can come down to BSC, spend the weekend with us. We have a social, great time there. You can also stream it live online. I know this is the most common question I get. The recordings will be available to everybody who attends or watches online. Recordings will be available afterwards as well. We have an early bird special until January 18th, so make sure you get that because the price goes up and we're not giving discounts after that. So make sure you sign up. So hope to hear from you and see you there. If you have questions for our next episode, drop them in the comments or shoot us a DM and we will get to them on the next episode together.
Bye, Al.
Adios.